Welcome to Edge of Intelligence, the podcast where we explore how AI, automation, and strategy are redefining what's possible in business and beyond. I'm Carl Owen, Fractional CIO and AI Advisor at Proteligen. Today's episode takes us into one of the most human and high-stakes frontiers for AI, healthcare. I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Charlap, physician, entrepreneur, and CEO of Medome.ai, a precision health company using AI and multi-source data to identify disease risk before it strikes. Stephen's story blends medicine, data, and a deeply personal purpose, driven by the belief that AI can help prevent millions of premature deaths. Stephen, welcome to the Edge of Intelligence.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. Let's start here. What was the origin moment that set you on the path to building Medome.ai?
Well, unfortunately, Medome was born out of tragedy. It was called Soap Health. Soap Health was born out of tragedy. My older brother, a practicing cardiologist, was misdiagnosed and lost his life. And after that, I became determined to understand why his colleagues misdiagnosed him and spent 3.5 years at Stanford and 2 years at Harvard studying the entire misdiagnosis process, and developed Soap Health, which initially was offered to physicians. It's now being used by physicians and thousands of patients. And we're launching this November, roughly a month from now, the Medome, which is the first direct-to-consumer personal health record that allows you to collect, organize, analyze, and personalize your health record. So anytime something goes wrong, it knows everything about you, and it's in a position to much quicker figure out what's going wrong and to help you understand what to do about it. And if, in fact, you need to go to a physician, which you do a certain percentage of the time, it will prepare you for the medical visit by generating a series of questions that you can tell your doctor you would like to get answered, and you can edit that group of questions. So if you don't want all the questions to be asked and answered, you can decide which are most important to you. And post-appointment, you can, pre-appointment, you can ask the doctor permission, or in certain states you don't even have to ask, to record the appointment and feed it in the model and get a second opinion on the appointment right after the appointment. So Medome is what we call your own personal medical expert in your pocket to improve access, affordability, and accuracy of primary care.
That's amazing. Medome.ai stands at the intersection of clinical science, AI modeling, and preventative care, a convergence that's redefining how we think about the physician-patient relationship.
Yep. Another way to think about Medome is me, do, me. That's the words that actually make up Medome. And it's really the beginning, the first ushering in of do-it-yourself medicine. Medicine has become very expensive. It's not as accurate a science as one would hope it would be, and it's not always accessible, particularly primary care, shortages, etc. Medome gives you your AI-first primary care encounter. And the more it knows about you, the better the advice becomes, the more personalized the recommendations become, and it will keep asking you questions to understand truly what's going on. So whether you hear me say the word Medome or the word Soap Health, think Medome.
What does SOAP stand for, and how does it reshape traditional clinical history taking?
Well, SOAP actually is the definition of the typical way that historically doctors approach patients. SOAP stands for Subjective, Objective, Assessment, Plan. So a doctor collects your information, combines it with objective information like test results, does an assessment, and then develops a plan based on that.
You've said 80% of diagnoses rely on patient history. Why do physicians get this wrong, and how does AI help with that?
Yeah, so, it's funny. Somebody wrote that on LinkedIn the other day, and I said, you can get the right diagnosis 80% of the time for about 50 to 100 diseases if they present with a common presentation for that disease, so a typical presentation. If it's an atypical presentation or a uncommon disease or a rare disease, your diagnostic accuracy drops below 50%.
Can you explain how SOAP's AI medical interview assistant actually works? and how patients and physicians interact with it?
So the first thing I realized when I started studying this religiously was doctors don't spend enough time with patients. And even during the time that they spend with the patients, typically they cut off the patient within 21. They get a very quick idea in their head what's going on. They go down sometimes relatively narrow paths, and they just completely miss what else might be going on. And it's very easy to understand why. The typical doctor or primary care doctor spends 60 to 70% of their time on about 50 conditions. Over the course of, let's say, a 30-year career, they might see from under 1,200 to maybe over 2,000 other conditions. There are 28,000 plus conditions. That means that the typical primary care physician over the course of their career will experience less than 5 to less than 10% of all conditions, which makes it highly probable that if they see something they've never seen before, and they never learned about it in medical school, because they don't teach you all 28,000 conditions in medical school, you got no clue. You don't even have the clue of what tests to do in order to find out what's potentially going on. Some of the most difficult diagnoses require whole genome sequencing, could be related mutation, particularly in young children who have very unusual symptoms or usual symptoms that can't be explained without genetic testing. So diagnosis is really a very complicated process when it's complicated, and a very simple process when it's simple. But I like to joke that even a broken clock is right twice a day. Absolutely right. And there are a lot of tools out there that claim they diagnose well. Yeah, they diagnose well sinusitis, okay? But they don't diagnose cancer, heart disease, autoimmune diseases, and other complicated hematological diseases, endocrine diseases, etc. So I set out to understand how AI could be vastly superior to humans in diagnosing. Why replicate what humans are doing when humans are prone to error? Why not build a process that completely tries to surpass the human experience? And so the first thing we built was a better way to interact with the patient. Most doctors, when you walk in, they'll say to you, what brings you here? Or what concerns you most? Why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an open-ended question. And then, like I said, 21 seconds in, you get cut off. Okay, the doctor already has an idea of what's going on and wants to take you down a path. Okay, when you're talking to an AI, the AI is infinitely patient. Take all the time you want. In fact, one of our new engineers the other day fed his mother's case history, and he actually broke the model. Why? He put in 89 symptoms. Now, we fixed the model the next day. We realized why he broke it. We needed more tokens from the AI perspective, but she had 89 symptoms. A human doctor could not begin to wrap his or her head around 89 symptoms. And if she has 89 symptoms, I guarantee you she's on multiple medications. And some of those medications are causing at least half of her symptoms. The human brain wasn't meant to address that level of complexity, right? We have one true chess master. His ranking is somewhere between 24, I think 2,800, a little bit over 2,800. AI computers are at 4,000. Yes, humans still have certain advantages over AI. Intuition, to me, in medicine is sometimes a dangerous thing, but experienced intuition is a good thing. And AI isn't quite yet ready on the same level as a human with experienced intuition. But in many other ways, it is vastly superior.
Well, what's the biggest misunderstanding people have about AI in diagnostic use?
AI is an iterative and multifactorial process. You have to use the AI judiciously in a very focused way, sequentially. Don't try to do it all at once. See, people who come to ChatGPT, they dump a case into ChatGPT and they want ChatGPT to give them an answer. And guess what? It'll give them the right answer sometimes. And when it does, it's a big case in the news. Some, child had something and went to multiple doctors. Nobody knew the answer. The mother fed it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT suggested something. She went back to the doctors. Turned out she was right. Or another case recently, again, same thing. Multiple doctors didn't get the answer, got the answer. Yes. But putting the case together It is the challenge. Knowing what tests need to be ordered, if tests need to be ordered. Remember, when we talk about that 80% or 50%, what's the rest of it? Testing, physical exam, okay? Whole genome sequencing, biopsies, imaging, genetic testing, etc. So this is why I invested so many years. Like people say, you start a startup company and it takes you 5+ years of research to start a startup company? You're the worst entrepreneur in the world. And I said, I'm on a mission in memory of my brother to save people's lives. Either you do it right or you don't do it at all. And I can't stand how many people keep telling me, make your product simpler, okay? Don't get the diagnosis right away. So many more doctors will want to buy it because right now you're asking the doctor to read all the information you're giving him or her to get the right diagnosis. Because we're not only collecting more information, we're analyzing the crap out of it. Doctors only want to give you 20 minutes. They'll do everything for you for 20 minutes. But they suffer from cognitive bias, decision fatigue, knowledge gaps for 20 minutes.
Well, some critics argue AI in medicine can depersonalize care, yet SOAP seems to amplify personalization through precision. How do you respond to that tension?
Listen, the concept of personalized care has existed in multiple industries, okay? Trying on your shoes in a shoe store. Person puts the shoe on, brings the shoe on, makes it comfortable, and then Zappos came along and you bought shoes at home, okay? Banks. You went to the bank, you had a relationship with the bank, you had a relationship with the teller, you exchanged money. Now you go on your phone and you transfer money or you pay for things. Okay? Who said that healthcare in all facets needs to be personalized? Yes. Star Trek, I think, got it right. The first Star Trek had a human doctor. The next Star Trek had a counselor. Because that's what you need in healthcare. You need somebody sometimes to hold your hand and tell you it's going to be okay. But when it comes to diagnosis, what do you want? The really personal, empathetic human being who gets the wrong diagnosis? Or the hard, cold AI that nails it, okay? If you're looking for somebody to hold your hand, go to a counselor. If you're looking for something to get you the right diagnosis, AI is already vastly superior. Not in all regards, not in all situations, but neither are humans. Think about Waymo, the autonomous car company. Last year, it drove 2 million people. This year, it's already driven 10 million people. Last year, it had 100 accidents. That's less than 0.1%. That's vastly lower than human beings on the road, okay? In the United States right now, nearly 400,000 people a year die and another 400,000 become permanently disabled. The National Academy of Medicine predicts that everyone will experience a misdiagnosis. So stop it already. Stop talking about the empathy of a doctor versus an AI. Guess what? You don't get into medical school for empathy. You get into medical school because you have good grades and MCATs and you get maybe 1 or 2 interviews with somebody, and anybody can fool somebody in 1 or 2 interviews. I'm tired of the nonsense. Okay? I wish we didn't need AI. I wish the human brain was infinitely smarter than it was and had far more intellectual capacity. And it could absorb all of medical knowledge. But the reality is, 150 years ago, the founder of the Mayo Clinic said, human intellectual capacity cannot process all of medical knowledge. 150 years ago. And medical knowledge is reported to be doubling every 73 days. I can't even believe that statistic, but that's what they say. That's a 16x increase in medical knowledge every year. I can't wrap my head around it, and I'm not even sure it's true, but I see it everywhere. Mm-hmm. Medical knowledge doubles every 73 days, okay? Wow. I try to keep up with this one site. It takes me hours every week to read all these new articles coming out about prevention and early disease detection and diagnosis, etc.
Wow. Well, your platform suggests physicians aren't currently asking the right questions. How much resistance have you faced from within the medical community itself?
Quite a bit. I have physician customers, but guess what? They all say to me, Steve, I don't want so much information. I don't have time to read it. And then they say something that really gets me. Look, I love physicians. My best friend is a physician. I'm a physician. My nieces are physicians. I have investors who are physicians. I have nothing against physicians, okay? But the reality is they will give you 20 minutes unless they're concierge, which means you pay them $2, $3, $5, $10, $25,000, and then they'll give you up to an hour typically. But your average physician only has 20 minutes. Why? Because in order to make a living, their reimbursement has not kept up with inflation. It is way, 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 way behind inflation. And if you don't keep up with inflation and you want to make a living, you got to see more patients. Last year, doctors' average compensation for a primary care physician was $330,000. That's real money. How'd they get to that number? 5.8% more patients. Where do you think they get that time? They cut time from other patients because they're already working 55, 60 hours a week. This is why they burn out. So it's not their fault. They're fighting with insurance companies to get paid. They're fighting with patients sometimes with unrealistic expectations. They're under threat of being sued all the time. The system is broken, but they are creatures of habit. They do what they do, and they've done it for 5 years, 20 years, 35 years. And they don't want to change the way they operate because they finally got into a mode, even if it burns them out, even if it wears them out, even if it leads to mistakes. They're comfortable in that mode. The only reason they embraced electronic medical records is because the government used carrots and sticks. If you use the electronic medical record, I'll pay you more money. If you don't, I'll pay you less money than I pay you now. So of course they switched. And then they complained about it for years, and now they live with it. They still complain about it, but they live with it. The humans have been out-trumped by medical knowledge, okay? And when they only give you 20 minutes, their attitude is, I'll give you 20 minutes today, I'll give you 20 minutes another day. And look, and if you really want to be fear-mongerer, so forgive me if I come off as a fear-mongerer, if we wiped out misdiagnosis, we probably would wipe out 25% of the healthcare costs. And where would those costs be pulled back from? Healthcare providers, physicians, and hospitals. So they have no malfeasance. No doctor is thinking, I'm not going to diagnose you today because I'm going to have you come back later. But the reality is there's no financial incentive to get it today if I can get it next week. I get paid again to see you next week. So they don't do it on purpose, but their attitude is, I got 20 minutes for you. I will give you my heart and soul and my full attention for that 20 minutes. But that's it. Because if I don't keep going, if I don't get 3 patients an hour, if I don't get 24 patients or so a day, I'm not going to make enough money. And I feel like I deserve to make that money because I went to school for 4 years college and majored, in science or something else to get into medical school. Then I went to 4 years of medical school. Then I did at least 3 years of residency, and then I did sub-training after that. I deserve to make a good living. And I don't think anybody begrudges them that per se.
I don't either. This is a fascinating case where AI isn't replacing the clinician. It's augmenting their time, judgment, and recall, like you've said. I think that's where the most compelling use case lies for AI.
But they don't want to see. I built a very powerful engine, and the analogy is building a Ferrari when they're on roads for it yet. You can't accelerate on grass, okay, on rocky terrain with a Ferrari. This is a powerful engine. They have to change the way they practice to use this and use it properly, which is why we're releasing a direct-to-consumer product, which I'm sure is going to have some controversy. But the point is, I don't want a patient to ever go to a doctor again unprepared. I don't want a patient again to ever leave a doctor uninformed. We are building a powerful set of capabilities to make sure that they are prepared for the appointment to get the most out of the appointment, and they have a way of double checking. We call it first and last opinion. It's an insurance policy. And guess what? It will be so ridiculously inexpensive that not a single person on this planet will not be able to afford it. Because I'm on a mission to save lives in memory of my brother, and I take that as I've sworn my life to that mission.
Awesome. Well, how did you train SOAP's AI, and how do you validate for safety, equity, and diagnostic performance?
Tough questions with tough answers. We have tested it against hundreds of real-world case studies, thousands of real patients. Okay. For equity, we've tried to create the program to be at a very low health literacy, low literacy level, available in different languages, intuitive imagery. So even if your language skills are weak, you can look at the screen and understand what's being asked of you. Okay, this is how we've, to some extent, trained for equity. Of course, everybody uses large language models that are trained on the medical literature, and the medical literature, unfortunately, is not always equitable. Studies are done with certain white men populations as opposed to other populations. So it's sometimes very hard to truly adjust for that. But what we've tried to do in addition to that is we have built multiple proprietary databases. Again, I spent 10 years studying this topic, over 10 years now. My brother passed away about 12 years ago. I immediately started working on it, but then I for a year before I went actually to Stanford for 3.5 years, I've come to build multiple databases that have never been built before in U.S. history, and I believe in the world. And I'll give you an example of just one of them, because I don't want to give away all our trade secrets here.
Sure.
We have the largest database of atypical presentations. That means symptoms that add up to not the disease you think it does, but to a different disease. We have both the disease you think it adds up to and the disease that it doesn't add up to, but it actually is pointing to. Okay, just one example of building this database from scratch over a period of time to make sure that the model just doesn't do a causally related but not does a correlation, symptom, disease. In fact, I just wrote something in LinkedIn, I think it was 2 days ago, about why symptom checkers, all these symptom checker companies, as far as I'm concerned, you could take them and throw their products in the garbage. Why? Because they're based on easy cases. And I got into an argument with one of the CEOs of one of these big companies, raised hundreds of millions of dollars, who shows me that people say the product saved their lives. I say, great, you show me the ones where the product saved their lives. How about all the people who didn't save their lives? How about all the people who gave them the wrong diagnosis? Where are those people? Why aren't you showing me that? Then he said to me, by the way, you said that on your LinkedIn post that lots of companies claim that they diagnose better than doctors. He goes, first of all, we never made that claim. And second of all, we don't diagnose. I said, you don't diagnose? We don't diagnose. We assess. I said, it says on your website, patient says your product told them what the right answer was. They went to their doctor. The doctor agreed and treated them for that. That sure sounds like a diagnosis to me. And then on your LinkedIn page, there are multiple examples of patients said, you got the right diagnosis for me. So let me get this right. The patient believe you're diagnosing, but you're not diagnosing. That's what you want me to believe, okay? I've challenged every symptom checker that I know of to a public diagnosis contest. Nobody will take me up on it. Nobody. I've publicly called them out. And you know what? People have called me out for calling them out. Like, Steve, why do you have to knock down other people to succeed? I said, it has nothing to do with my success. Your failure doesn't make me more successful. But you putting a product in front of people, deluding them that you are consistently giving them the best possible assessment, to me is criminal.
How do you manage accuracy, transparency, and patient trust when SOAP makes predictive or risk-based recommendations?
Well, one way that I will do that, as I did in my first company, I will give my personal phone number in the application. If you have a problem with the application and it's not working properly, don't call customer service. Call the CEO, okay? The buck literally stops with me. I gave it to 5 million people in my first company. 12 people called me over a number of years. I stand for what I stand for. And somebody said to me today, well, make sure you get another phone. No, one phone number, call me if there's something wrong, okay? I don't want a penny from somebody if I'm not helping them.
It's an admirable approach. Are you embedding explainability into the outputs, especially for patients or doctors who need to understand why a particular conclusion was reached?
We do. Do I believe it's 100% accurate? No. AI still has room for improvement. It just, I believe, in many aspects, better than human doctors already. And that's why I believe right now human doctors need to partner with AI to deliver the best possible results. I would not 100% trust AI alone. That's why I strongly believe the physician continues to have a very significant role. But AI is, first of all, better than nothing. And according to the National Association of Community Healthcare Centers, over 100 million Americans basically have nothing. And according to the AMA, it's 87 million Americans basically have nothing. 30 to 40 million Americans don't have health insurance. Even basic primary care is very expensive. And 60-something million Americans have Medicaid, where 40% of doctors won't see them. And 90% of Americans have high deductible insurance plans, where primary care is essentially paid out of pocket because you got a $5,000 deductible. And so if I can deliver something better than nothing for practically nothing, who should oppose that? Recognizing that it will never be 100% foolproof, any more than Waymo will never get into an accident. We cannot make extremely good the enemy of perfect.
Completely agree with that. Well, and the human's never going to be 100% accurate either, to your point.
But we know the human is not 100% accurate, okay? But the human gets tired, the AI doesn't get tired. The human gets distracted, the AI doesn't get distracted. The human doesn't know something, the AI knows so much more than the human. AI against the top jeopardy was no contest.
Mm-hmm. Well, have there been any regulatory data access or labeling issues that have slowed you down?
No, because I think the FDA doesn't want to stifle innovation if it's used judiciously and it doesn't make false claims. I will never tell somebody that 100% of the time our application is going to give them the right diagnosis. I will just tell them that compared to physicians, I believe we will triumph every time.
Well, many health tech companies are layering AI on top of flawed data today. How is SOAP challenging that approach?
It's a very tough question because there's a guy named John Ioannidis, a professor at Stanford, that about 15 years ago published that 70% of journal articles are unreliable. Medical literature. Why? It's called impact score. When you publish, the significance of your paper is measured in what impact score, how many times it gets quoted by others, etc. If somebody does a big study, that gets a big impact score. If you repeat that study, you get a small impact score because you're not the first study. So lots of studies never get repeated. And the scientific method is all about reproducibility. So if you don't reproduce a study, then you know the first study was right. And we know a lot of studies get retracted. Turns out either they compiled the data wrong, they calculated the data wrong, or they just out and out committed fraud. Not an overwhelming majority of studies, a small number of studies, but which studies are right, which studies are wrong. And then you have peer-reviewed journals, and you hope that the peers who review the studies do a good job, but sometimes they don't. There's a big study about a blood thinner that the data turns out not to be reliable. It's one of the major, I don't want to get into a lawsuit with that company, but it's a major anticoagulant for people with stents. Turns out the data is now not considered trustworthy. Okay, so AI models are trained on that data, right? And they're probabilistic models. That's how LLMs are used. So it's easy to make a mistake.
Yeah. Well, that kind of gets me to my next question. With LLMs entering healthcare now, there's fear of hallucination and error. You've leaned into conversational agents. Why take that risk?
Again, because it's better than nothing. Again, because it will definitely supplement existing doctors. Look, our model, I told you, was broken by 89 symptoms the other day. I don't know if I mentioned that. One of our engineers put in 89 symptoms for his mother. It broke the model. Okay, just an example, the model broke. The model made a mistake the other day, another mistake, a big mistake. Okay, but it was, thank God, an easy to find mistake. It asked the patient if they had been screened for HIV. For some reason, the model interpreted that as a patient having HIV. Now, the beauty in our model is we reflect answers back to the user. So the user immediately saw, the model thinks I have HIV, but I don't, so he removed it. So AI, like human beings, can misinterpret sometimes. And yes, it can hallucinate, even though the latest models are hallucinating considerably less. As my wife would say, life is not perfect. There are perfect moments in life, but life is not perfect. The world is not perfect. Nature is not perfect. Okay? Some will say God is perfect, but some will say there is no God. The point of the matter is, from a human perspective, there's no perfection. I've had some top-level automobiles that failed in the middle of the highway. One did. Middle of the highway. Just stopped. Thank God it was very late at night and there weren't very many cars on. So there's no perfection. But again, better than nothing, makes existing resources considerably better. Let's be fair. Those who have an abundance of what they need in life should not judge others for taking advantage of something that's better than nothing. It's like what we do with orphan drugs, or we do for empathy consideration. We let people try experimental drugs. Why? Because if we don't let them try it, they die. They may die with the experimental drug, but for God's sake, let them try.
Yep, I agree with that 100%.
So I'm in that camp that says AI is going to be something we can't even imagine yet. The way it's growing. Yes, I'm in that camp that believes it's going to continue to improve, and in the short term will not live up to the expectations, but long term will exceed those expectations. Okay, that's been said by some famous people, right? But even in the short term, let's recognize it is what it is. It can process so much more information than the human brain. It can point out patterns. And here's the beauty. My tool generates a list of potential, I don't want to say diagnosis because it's not a lot to diagnose, but potential conditions that may be in play. It's been shown in a U.S. study and in a United Kingdom study, 2 studies, separate studies, scientific reproducibility, that giving a doctor a list of possible diagnoses before he or she sees the patient increases accuracy by 8 to 12%. Okay? Giving it to them at the end, no benefit. Why? Because of cognitive bias. They've already decided in their head what it is. If they see it on the list, they say, I got it right. No benefit. But give it to them before you get them thinking about things they otherwise wouldn't have thought about. Makes them more accurate.
Well, what's been most difficult? Tech stack choices, data partnerships, clinical trust, or product market alignment?
The most difficult is, as I said, building a Ferrari when the roads haven't been fully installed yet. Building something so powerful that every doctor in America should literally be using it because it is so inexpensive for them, okay? It pays for itself multiple times over, and it will simply make them better diagnosticians. But you know what? Doctors all think they're great diagnosticians, and wouldn't you? If you did the same thing every day, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, wouldn't you think you're a great diagnostician? But here's the problem in medicine. If a patient comes to you and they don't agree with you, they don't come back. So you don't know that you got the wrong diagnosis. In fact, a friend of mine said to me, Steve, I was feeling depressed, so I went to a psychiatrist. He put me on an antidepressant. It wasn't helping. So I went back and he put me on a second antidepressant. It wasn't helping. So I went to a second psychiatrist and he put me on a third antidepressant. It wasn't helping. I realized I didn't need an antidepressant. I needed to change the way I was thinking about it. And I got better. He said, but you know what? There's 2 psychiatrists out there right now who think they treated my depression. And they would both be wrong. Patients who don't agree with the doctor's diagnosis oftentimes don't return. Nobody tells the doctor they got it wrong. So guess what? They think they're always right. And guess what? If they're wrong the first time and they get it the second time, they still think they're always right because they got it right the second time. Again, nothing against doctors. They really try hard. They really do help people. Only they can write prescriptions. So without them, you don't get a prescription. Every time you got a prescription that actually helped you, it's thanks to a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. But when they don't help you, it sucks. When my brother's colleagues couldn't pick up on his disease and he died for it, that sucks. When my friend's doctor missed the diagnosis for 18 months and she died, that sucks. when I was misdiagnosed and almost died. That sucked.
Absolutely. Well, as you build toward broader scale, what kind of partner or advisor could accelerate that process?
Listen, we have a patent pending on a new way of using AI, and a Google and Microsoft could actually make our ability to implement that technology into a real world, most powerful approach to diagnosis ever created. Okay. And we were making headway with Google when the person we were working through left Google. So we spent all this time cultivating a relationship only to have the relationship basically terminated because she left. And so chasing these big companies is not something I want to use my time. Look, historically, the company is almost 6 years old. I think we've had one salesperson. I know we've had one salesperson. You know why? If I have a choice of improving the product or trying to sell it, I keep improving it. Now, that's not a way to become successful in the entrepreneurial setting, but I'm more interested in perfecting this product than I am in selling it right now. I do want people using it, so I have doctors using it, but I don't charge them because I want the feedback. I want to keep improving it. And I don't take any compensation, so my money that I would get paid goes into product development. And we have 45 people, and I said 5 people working on AI. So we have a very significant number of people. And I've been funding this out of pocket because I was a successful entrepreneur. But I'd love to raise money from other people and help me, because with more money, I accelerate the rate of achieving near perfection. Again, perfection is not possible, but I learned at a very young age, if you want to get an A, you better aim for an A+. And I still instilled that in my children, who hate for me to talk about them, so I won't talk about them, but they are all extremely successful in their own right. And all married people equally successful in their own right.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you've said the U.S. healthcare system is built backwards. How is SOAP structured to avoid the same systemic traps?
Look, I always say the greatest person in American history was George Washington. You know, some people are upset at him. He was a slave owner. Yes, I do not condone slavery. But when he was offered the monarchy, he turned it down. He fought and lived up to what he fought for, which was a democratic governance. Okay, I mean, Lincoln was also great for other reasons, obviously. But those two men, to me, are the two most significant, great people of American history, because they stood for something beyond themselves. And so AI, if owned by very powerful organizations that optimize profit over well-being, will have the same problems with what's wrong with healthcare right now, which is the for-profit motive, and I'm not against for-profit, okay? I'm a capitalist. But this emphasis on optimizing for profit is at the disservice of every human being. I want to approach HHS and push the AI agenda in this country. But we have to do so in a way not to let anybody run away with control of that. And I'm not in favor of regulating AI. I think we got to let it loose. And is it Terminator in our future? I hope not. But there are people who think it is, that the AI will turn on us.
Well, do you ever worry that being too far ahead of the market creates risk, or are you betting that the market will catch up to your conviction?
Well, there's no question that being too far ahead of the market is very risky in establishing product market fit. But again, I set out with a very, very simple purpose. Build something that eliminates misdiagnosis and eliminates malpractice. So guess what? A lot of people say to me, Steve, why don't you go to malpractice companies, sell your product? So I went to one big malpractice company and they said, why don't you go to our reinsurer? And then I realized, why wouldn't a malpractice insurance company want to use an application like mine? And it's very simple. The product works. It reduces malpractice. People see less value in malpractice insurance. They want significant reductions in premiums. Premiums shrink. Profit shrinks. That's not in the best interest of malpractice companies. Malpractice companies have figured out actuarially how to collect money from doctors, pay for malpractice suits, defend malpractice suits, and make a good profit. They don't want to eliminate malpractice. It puts them out of business.
Exactly.
Again, these disincentives are as powerful as any incentives, and there's too many disincentives in healthcare. So you need really altruistic, and I'm altruistic, but I'm not probably altruistic enough. Why? Because I have investors and I want them to get a fair return on their investment for trusting me with their hard-earned money and allowing me to fulfill my mission. So I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders to get them a fair return. But you know what? I don't need to make them billionaires. I don't need to make them centimillionaires. I think if they get 10 times what they gave me, that would be a fair return. They should be happy with that.
I would think. Well, Steve, what does success look like 3 to 5 years from now?
That soap is widely acknowledged as having saved 1 million lives.
Do you see soap staying focused on cancer detection or evolving into a larger platform?
We are not focused on cancer detection. We are focused on detection of all diseases, whether common, uncommon, or rare. We built initially from a early cancer, early heart disease perspective, but we've evolved far beyond that to all of medicine.
Thanks for clarifying that. How are you thinking about building trust with the clinical community, especially given the skepticism that's out there?
I'm going to tell you a story. At Harvard Business School, I founded an ethics magazine, and I couldn't gain the trust of the administration. Why? They had gotten $30 million in 1987 from a guy named Shad, who was a former SEC chairman, to improve the ethics curriculum at Harvard. But they didn't want a student to be the first one to come out with an ethics initiative. And so they blocked me every possible way, okay? One of the deans wouldn't let me form my own club, told all the tenured faculty not to be an advisor, everything possible to block me. So I went to an existing club and I said, will you sponsor me? And they said yes. I went to a professor who was not tenured and I said, will you be my faculty advisor? And he said yes. And I put together a distinguished list of students, and I came back to the school and I said, will you let me do this? And they said, only if you do exactly what we tell you to do. And I said, sure. And the dean wrote the intro to the magazine, the prelogue. Jim Burke of Johnson & Johnson, you might remember him, of the famous Tylenol thing, wrote an article about the Tylenol scare. Roosevelt Cantor, a very distinguished professor at the school, wrote an article. We published a whole bunch of ethical vignettes asking students, faculty, and alumni how they would have handled these ethical situations. And we published the magazine. And after I published it, the dean, not the top dean, but one of the other deans, who was the most excellent in blocking me, came to me and said, you know, that magazine came out very well, better than I'm sure you expected it to be. So insulting me to the very end. But at graduation, suddenly I hear my name called out that they awarded me an award for service to the school. So I've been fighting uphill fights. That's just one of so many. My whole life. Medicine is an institution, but there are many players, and they don't all think alike. Some have told me they embrace everything I'm doing. Others have told me, let other technology have its day, like AI scribes. AI scribes, to me, to quote Henry Ford, is described as saying something, though it's dubious he ever said it, that if he asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. AI scribes, which are technology that listens in on the doctor-patient's conversation and creates a summary note, is a faster horse. So right now, companies with hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing dollars are convincing doctors that they can't live without AI scribes. Though the objective studies done on AI scribes show that it saves less than 1 minute per patient and does not reduce burnout. But every article you read, it saves so much time, no more pajama time. Okay, doctors are going home early, no more burnout, AI scribes is the solution for everything. So I called out AI scribes and people attacked me. What do you have to call out AI scribes? Why do you have to drag down other people? Because I'm on a mission. And the mission doesn't mean just you build a product and you sell it to whoever wants to buy it and you make as much money as you want and hopefully you actually save some lives. No, it's if people are being distracted by faster horses, and they're not getting to the hospital on time because they're driving a faster horse as opposed to a car or an ambulance that will get them there and save their lives. Is it wrong to call out the faster horses?
No.
Well, a lot of people apparently think it is.
Well, what kind of partners would it be? EHR vendors, research institutions, government? So what type of partners would help you move the needle the most?
When it comes to partnership, I'm a contrarian. I love them. I am willing to share everything with somebody else that helps me fulfill my mission. Why? Again, Just like I call out the companies I think are doing a disservice by selling inferior products, I just want to save lives in memory of my brother, okay? Put a lie detector on me and ask me, Steve, do you really secretly want to make money or do you want to save lives? I swear on my life, I want to save lives, okay? And so any partnership with anybody that gets me closer to succeeding, I'm in. And I've gone to big companies and small companies and said, let's partner. And I have actually 3 partnerships that have been signed in the last several months. One is a company called IntelliPeer, one of the top AI agent companies in the country. Another one is ABW Medical, one of the top revenue cycle management companies, particularly for Athena Health. And one is called Ready Computing, which builds technology particularly for social services. And I partner with them. And I'll be grateful for anything that the partnership does to get us closer, saving lives. So whether it's insurance company, clinical organization, research organization, the government, I'll partner with anybody. I love partnerships. I love other smart people at the table.
You've already alluded to this a little bit, but you're advocating for preventative care in a system that profits from treatment. Can SOAP scale without fighting that financial model?
Look, here's the reality about preventive medicine. I invested $2 million of my own money in a preventive medicine, and it failed for basically lack of funding. And I don't mean outside funding. It failed because nobody pays for prevention. And the reason we don't pay for prevention is because people say, well, if you prevent things, how do we know it was really you and not something else? And the answer is, prevention is too expensive right now if we try to apply it to everybody. Prevention has to be personalized. In other words, we have to find the smokers who are going to develop lung cancer and prevent them from smoking. We have to find the pre-diabetics that are going to become diabetic and prevent them from becoming diabetic. In other words, we can't apply prevention of diabetes to the entire U.S. population, even though there's too many people that have prediabetes and diabetes, because it's not cost effective. It's also like these companies that are trying to sell tests that pick up cancer early. I've gone to these companies and I said, what's your indication for testing? In other words, who should get tested? And what's their answer? Everybody should get tested. And if you push them further, everybody old should get testing because the number one risk factor for cancer is age. And so everybody over a certain age should get tested. We don't have money to test everybody just because they're a certain age. We got to have better criteria. Why don't you do research to find who most will benefit from your test? And by the way, certain cancers you catch early, you can't treat them. So what's the point of catching it early? To say, let the person know they have cancer and they're going to die? Well, I mean, some people will say there is benefit to that, so I'm not going to argue with that. But my point is, you do a test that picks up cancer early, why not do it every day? The cancer that wasn't there might be there tomorrow, a week from now, 3 weeks from now, a month, 6 weeks, right? But they'll say, no, it's okay. You just have to do it once a year. From 1 year to the next, you can be dead. My brother was dead 1 year to the next. So indications. This is how medicine has always worked. There's a reason we test. Because otherwise there's thousands of tests. Why don't we do thousands of tests on everybody every day? Because it doesn't make sense and it's not cost effective. There's limited resources. We don't have unlimited resources. And we have to give more attention to those who need more attention and less attention to those who don't need attention. And we have to figure out who that is. I learned a lot in my preventive medicine clinic. It was an expensive lesson, but I really learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is that patients open up after 40 minutes. I spent 90 minutes with 1,000 patients who came through that practice, and 4 hours with couples sometimes, hearing each of their story and then hearing their combined story. And it was amazing to me. It took 40-something minutes for people to start telling me things they said they never told another doctor.
Yeah, they're developing that personal relationship with you, building that trust.
Okay. Now, can they build a trust with an AI? Well, that's why people laughed at me. I spent thousands of hours giving our AI character a personality. My wife used to say, why are you wasting your time helping develop her personality? Because, for example, if you talk inappropriately to her, she'll call you out. Why? A lot of people say, why do women have to be AI characters? Okay, everybody's bossing them around. It's not appropriate. It's sexist. It's misogynistic. Well, not my woman AI character. She calls you out. She'll tell you you're inappropriate. People say, you can't do that. People will get offended. I say, if somebody's talking inappropriate to a female representation, I had a mother, I have a wife, I have 2 daughters, 3 granddaughters. It's not okay to talk inappropriately to a woman. My character will call you out. If you say you're ugly, she'll say, that's no way to speak to another person. If you curse at her, she'll respond. If you say something inappropriate, like take your clothes off, she'll say you're inappropriate. Okay?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
She's not there to entertain, but she is there to be empathetic and get you the right answer.
That's awesome. Well, as soap continues to evolve, I have no doubt it's going to work as you intend it. It could render
From your mouth to God's ears.
it could render parts of the current medical system obsolete. Is that your intention?
No. My intention is to let medicine go to a whole nother place. I want to see cancer cured. I don't want to catch cancer early. I want to prevent cancer. I don't want to catch heart disease early. I want to prevent heart disease. I want to prevent autoimmune diseases. Medicine could really shift towards a much more futuristic pedestal of trying to treat disease after it develops, to doing everything possible to preventing disease altogether, to extending longevity in super meaningful ways. I'm not here to take away a livelihood from anybody. I just want that livelihood to do more good than simply stop less harm from happening.
What a great mission. If there's one action you'd urge healthcare leaders to take now, whether it's adopting AI, prioritizing early detection, or shifting how they think about risk, what would it be?
I would say reduce the power of the power brokers in healthcare. Break them down. There's too much power in the hands of too few. The antitrust to healthcare, break it down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Steve, thank you so much for your thoughtful and mission-driven conversation. Soap Health is tackling one of the most urgent challenges in healthcare, catching diseases before it's too late, with the power of intelligence and explainable systems. What's the best way for people to connect with you to find out more?
So first, let me just say, I got really intense on this call today. Okay, I usually don't get as petulant on a podcast. But I guess some of my frustration is showing that there's too much still anti-AI. But listen, I believe in responsible use of AI, and I'm part of threads that talk about responsible AI. And you asked some good questions about equity and bias and whatnot. And still there's important work to be done. But I believe that, as I taught my children when they were very young, persistence, perseverance, and tenacity. And what you heard from me today is not just passion, but it's passion wrapped up with tenacity. Mm-hmm. So again, if you felt like I was screaming or shouting or getting too intense, I apologize. But it really does matter to me that we find a way to eliminate misdiagnosis and save lives. In terms of contacting me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Stephen Charlap, MD, MBA. If you want to partner, I'm willing to listen. Please don't solicit me. I'm not buying a private jet. I'm not flying on a private jet. It seems that anytime I get a lot of publicity, private jet companies reach out to me. Many years ago, we made the Inc. 500, and people said, so what did it do for you? I got private jet solicitations. Okay, stop with the private jet solicitation. I'm fine flying with everybody else on the regular plane. So, but if you think you can help me, or quite frankly, if I can help you with a diagnostic issue, reach out to me. Look, the other day on Facebook, I posted something on a group, Misdiagnosis. I was reading these people suffering from terrible situations, and I said, right now I'm offering 10 people, no cost, use our application, and I will personally review the results with you, not as a licensed physician, which I am, but as a good Samaritan. So don't sue me, okay? But I want to help 10 people here because it breaks my heart to hear these people suffering. And people have reached out, and I will help them. No cost. You're suffering with a diagnosis that nobody's helping you with, reach out. I'll try to help you.
Thank you for that. Steve, I've really enjoyed our conversation. You can tell the passion is there, and I think that's just awesome with what you're trying to do and your mission. I think it's fantastic. And I really wish you a lot of success.
Like I said, from your mouth to God's ears.
And to our listeners out there, if this conversation sparked ideas around diagnostic automation, AI in clinical workflows, or scaling trust in healthcare, let's connect. Visit Proteligen.com or follow Edge of Intelligence on YouTube. Until next time, ask better questions, build smarter systems, and stay on the edge of intelligence.